Everyone knows that billionaire businessman Donald Trump is running for president of the United States. But not everyone has heard of his running mate. Mike Pence is the governor of Indiana and an evangelical Christian. Recently, he told our David Brody why he believes Donald Trump will be a pro-life president, and he offered his view on what the Bible says about the importance of voting. Here's David with our exclusive.
In this crucial battleground state of Pennsylvania, Mike Pence makes his best pitch.
America needs to be strong. And when Donald Trump becomes president of the United States, we will lead with American strength on the world stage once again.
With a month before Election Day, Mike Pence and the Trump campaign have some hard work ahead of them. Pence tells CBN News that they're not just fighting against the Clinton-Kaine ticket.
Do you believe that the media, the mainstream media in this country, wants Hillary Clinton as the next president of the United States?
I got to tell you, David, it's been amazing to me. I've always been aware of liberal media bias in the course of my career, but I have to tell you, since I joined this campaign, it's like 2 on 1 every day, with the mainstream national media doing half of Hillary Clinton's work for her every day.
So Pence says they will need to work harder and go straight to the voters, especially in blue states like Pennsylvania, where they might change some minds.
I think Trump has good intentions, but sometimes it gets misconstrued in the back and forth. But Pence was very good at laying out more of a vision and what the intentions are behind the rhetoric. So I think, yes, in some ways, I do believe that. He helps to calm the voters that aren't quite as easy.
Between now and November 8th, you're going to see Mike Pence at a lot of these rallies, like right here in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. There are a high number of white, blue-collar voters, and those are exactly the voters that Donald Trump and Mike Pence need to show up on Election Day. And they work to convince evangelicals that Trump can be trusted on issues important to them.
When it comes to issues like the sanctity of life, I couldn't be more proud to be standing with Donald Trump, the pro-life candidate for president of the United States in this race.
He will be a pro-life president.
I can assure you we have talked, I have heard him in public, I have heard him in private. Donald Trump is committed to the sanctity of life.
Another concern is whether conservative evangelicals will show up on Election Day. He has some biblical advice for the flock.
And I truly do believe that part of how we submit to the authorities that are over us in that biblical admonition is for us to participate, to be informed. However you vote is your choice.
Whatever the outcome, Pence believes the country needs a spiritual jolt.
It's an important time for us to pray. And I believe what's always been true is still true today, that if his people who are called by his name will humble themselves and pray, that he'll again hear from heaven and he'll heal our land.
David Brody, CBN News in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania.
A ministry to the persecuted church is calling for intense prayer for Pakistani Christian Asia Bibi. Christian Solidarity Worldwide is encouraging supporters to join in a 24/7 prayer event on October 12th. Bibi is facing her final appeal of the death penalty next week. Convicted of blasphemy against Islam, she was sentenced to death in 2010. She has already gone through a number of unsuccessful appeals. To learn how you can join the 24/7 prayer event, visit our website at cbnnews.com.
Christians in China are concerned a new law could lead to a crackdown on the church. The government is rolling out 26 new regulations, making it nearly impossible for Christians to worship freely. Chinese Christians are working around the clock to fight the anti-religion laws and worship without fear of imprisonment. Earlier, George Thomas spoke to Brent Fulton of China Source about the possibility of another crackdown.
Do these new laws signal a crackdown on Chinese Christians?
Well, they certainly are in line with what we've been seeing overall in China the last couple of years, which is a general tightening overall in society. And so in that sense, the laws are certainly not unexpected at all. In fact, many have been waiting and wondering when the government was going to get around to actually implementing further regulations in the area of religion.
And to that point, is this specifically targeting Christians, or are they also concerned about Muslims, Tibetans, Buddhists, other religious groups?
There are provisions in the new regulations that deal specifically with extremism and terrorism. And so those would be seen as probably directed more at some of the groups you just mentioned. There are other provisions, however, for example, dealing with unregistered meetings and also internet activities that seem to be more directed towards the Christians in China.
Why is the government, Brent, so concerned about Christians? Do they view, for example, Christians as a threat?
There is a long history, of course, of the Christians in China and Christianity in China being associated with Western powers. And there are still those in the government today that believe that Christianity is being used by the West to try to infiltrate China. And so in these new regulations, there's things that specifically mention foreign infiltration. And I think that's what they're most concerned about, is the influence of the West as they see it happening through the church.
Isn't there a greater dialogue between the underground church and the authorities to help better understand each other?
There certainly has been. And in that sense, the new regulations are a big disappointment, because a year ago, representatives of the central government actually met with house church leaders and talked about what they were doing. And there was a sense at that time that there was a bit more understanding being developed. Now these new regulations show up, and it seems like we're just back to where we were before.
How do they think the government is going to go about enforcing these new regulations?
It's very problematic. You've got groups meeting in the cities now unofficially of 100 or more members who meet regularly on a Sunday. And if you suddenly try to limit them from doing that, they will meet as families in smaller groups elsewhere in the city. And so you'll just end up having more groups meeting, which means more work for the government to try to keep track of all the groups that continue to meet. And so the enforcement of this is, I think, very problematic.
Brent, is God still moving in China?
God is moving in China in incredible ways. And I think the example of the urban church today is really a testimony of what God has been doing. You've got these urban house churches sprouting up in cities across China. They're very out there. They're very open about what they're doing. They have a burden to be involved in helping their society. And many of them are talking about sending missionaries beyond China's borders.
Brent Fulton of China Source, a keen watcher of all things China. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast.
Thank you, George.
Well, here in America, religious freedom is the newest battle line in this year's presidential election. Westminster Theological Seminary in Philadelphia takes on the topic in a conference called Faith in the Public Square. CBN News' Mark Martin spoke with the school's president, Dr. Peter Lilback, about how Americans are drifting from the nation's Christian heritage.
We are aware that the culture that we've been part of for so many years is beginning to move from being just a post-Christian culture to literally being an anti-Christian culture. They see a commitment to traditional marriage as an expression of hate speech, a belief that genders are divinely given as part of our personhood as some sort of opposition to the norms and standards of an enlightened culture.